Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of clinical precision.
Right.
Like you break your arm, the X-ray spits out an image with a jagged white line, and the doctor just taps the screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. The path forward is binary. It's broken, you cast it, you heal.
We really crave that visibility. I mean, a physical wound offers a clear, categorized path to recovery, which is, it's incredibly comforting when you're in pain.
But then you step into the world of human relationships.
Yeah.
Specifically, the absolute devastation of heartbreak and unrequited love, and suddenly that X-ray machine is just
Completely useless.
we're looking at an emotional landscape that is murky, confusing, and honestly, it can hurt just as much, if not more, than that broken bone. But according to a really fascinating breakdown by the team over at Neurovox, that pain might not be as invisible to our brains as we think.
Yeah, it's kind of the ultimate diagnostic blind spot. Because we can't put a cast on a broken heart, society sort of assumes we should just be able to snap out of it.
Right.
We tell ourselves to simply move on, and the failure to do so compounds the original pain with this really heavy layer of guilt.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring the mechanics of toxic, unrequited emotional loops. Like why you, me, and literally everyone we know occasionally get stuck investing oceans of energy into people who treat us like an afterthought.
Yeah, it happens to all of us.
And more importantly, how you can actually biohack your way out of that loop using this wild mix of ancient philosophy and modern neuroscience. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the Neurovox breakdown anchors this entire phenomenon in a highly relatable scenario. Consider a dynamic where, say, two people meet and the initial chemistry is just fantastic.
Right.
And one person, let's call her the protagonist of this story, she gets incredibly excited about the potential for a serious relationship.
But then comes the dreaded pivot.
Right, the pivot.
The texts slow down,
Right.
The hangouts require more and more logistical gymnastics.
Yeah, the excuses start piling up.
And as he pulls away, she leans in harder. And when she finally forces the classic "what are we" conversation, he drops the line.
He just wants something casual.
Right. But crucially, he adds that they can keep hanging out exactly as they have been.
Which is a terrible bargain, but she accepts it. She agrees to his terms because the emotional investment is already deep.
She's already in it.
Exactly. She hopes proximity will change his mind. So every interaction becomes this agonizing cocktail of joy because she's in his presence, and despair because she knows he's keeping one foot out the door.
Well, eventually he decides even the casual romance is too much and downgrades her to just a friend. So fast forward a few weeks. They're at a mutual friend's birthday party. She's sitting on the periphery of the room, completely bathed in the blue light of her phone, ignoring the party completely.
Yeah, and the creator of the video walks over to check on her, only to realize she is meticulously scrolling through that exact guy's Instagram.
Oh.
She's analyzing his photos, she's drafting a text to him, she is actively sustaining herself on what we call emotional crumbs.
Just scraping by on tiny, totally meaningless interactions. And, I mean, we have to talk about the people handing out these crumbs.
Yeah.
There's a brilliant term used in the source, emotional leeches.
It's a great term.
Right. People who keep you orbiting them, soaking up your affection and your energy, strictly to massage their own egos.
Well, because being adored feels universally good. I mean, the leech recognizes the affection, doesn't reciprocate it, but absolutely refuses to cut the cord because that external validation is intoxicating.
They want the attention.
Exactly. They keep you on the hook for their own self-esteem.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
But we need to validate the reality of what the person on the hook is actually experiencing.
Yeah.
When she is sitting at that party staring at her phone, the heartbreak she is feeling is not just some, metaphor for sadness.
No, not at all. If we connect this to the bigger picture of evolutionary biology, the neuroscience here is actually staggering. When you experience a profound social rejection, like a severing of a deep bond, it activates the anterior cingulate cortex.
Okay, the anterior cingulate cortex.
Right. And that is the exact same region of the brain that processes the suffering component of physical pain.
Wait. So the brain genuinely does not differentiate between a physical injury and getting dumped?
In terms of the subjective experience of distress, no.
Oh, wow.
Think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors, right? If you were ostracized from the tribe, you lost access to shared food, fire, protection.
You're out in the cold.
Literally, social isolation was a literal death sentence. So evolution wired our brains to register social rejection with the exact same visceral alarm bells as physical trauma to force us back into the safety of the group.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, so a broken heart is processed as a severe physical injury. In some clinical studies, patients rate severe heartbreak as feeling worse than having two broken legs.
Two broken legs. I mean, that puts the agony in a completely different context.
Yeah.
But this brings up a pretty massive contradiction, I think.
How so?
Well, let's look at this through the lens of Plato's The Symposium. So Plato argued this concept of desire in lack, meaning we desire most intensely that which is withheld from us.
Right, the scarcity creates value.
Exactly. His absence creates a vacuum, which spikes her desire. But if we know we are lacking this connection, and if the rejection hurts like two freaking broken legs, why do we keep touching the hot stove?
Yeah.
Like, why check the Instagram at the party?
The answer lies in a fundamental cognitive illusion.
Yeah.
We operate under the false assumption that we are in the driver's seat of our emotional dashboard.
Okay, right. Because we treat our feelings like executive decisions. Like,
Yeah.
if I want a pizza, I can make a conscious decision to order one.
Right.
Or I can decide what show to watch on Netflix, or I can decide to go on a diet. We assume we can just command our brains to initiate a detachment sequence the same way.
Which is physiologically impossible. You're confusing the somatic nervous system, which controls voluntary movements like picking up the phone, with the autonomic and limbic systems, which drive baseline emotions and survival responses.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot decide to fall out of love, just like you cannot consciously order your digestive system to digest a meal faster.
So we are essentially trying to use logic to negotiate with a reflex.
Yes, exactly. It's like, consider highly disciplined monks who have spent decades mastering meditation.
Yeah.
Some possess the ability to significantly lower their heart rate, but they are not doing it by sending a direct neural command to the heart muscle saying, beat slower.
Right. They are hacking the system indirectly.
Yes.
They focus on their breath, they slow their respiration, they alter their physical posture, and then, as a biological consequence of those controllable actions, the uncontrollable system, the heart rate, slows down.
And this raises a really important question for anyone trapped in one of these unrequited loops. If you accept that you cannot control the feeling, only the action, it completely eliminates the guilt.
That's huge.
It is. You did not choose to feel this agonizing attachment. You have no right to feel guilty for a biological reality.
But you are responsible for the breathing, so to speak. You are responsible for the actions you take while experiencing the feeling, which means we need to deeply understand the mechanics of how these emotions operate over time so we know which actions to actually take.
Yeah, and to understand that decay rate, we can look back to the 18th century Scottish philosopher David Hume,
Okay.
specifically his dissertation on the passions, which, just to clarify, in the language of the time, meant a dissertation on all emotions.
Oh, like anger or fear, not just romantic passion.
Exactly, all of it. Hume developed an analogy for emotional persistence that perfectly maps onto modern neuroimaging.
Okay, let's hear it. How did Hume break down the emotional timeline?
He argued that human emotions do not function like wind instruments.
Wind instruments, like a flute or something.
Yeah, a flute, a sax. If you blow air into a flute, you produce a note. The millisecond you stop blowing, the sound ceases entirely. Action and result are strictly tied to the present moment. Now, if emotions worked like flutes, the second someone said, I just want to be friends, your romantic attachment would instantly go silent.
Which would be incredibly convenient, obviously, but completely defies the actual human experience.
Right. Instead, Hume observed that emotions function like string instruments, a piano, a cello, a guitar. When you pluck a heavy gauge guitar string, it reaches a peak amplitude, and then, even after your hand is completely removed, it continues to vibrate.
It resonates.
Yes, it resonates, slowly and gradually fading into silence over time.
And the intensity of the strike determines the length of the vibration. So if someone cuts you off in traffic, you flick a very thin string, you get a quick, sharp note of anger, but by the time you've driven 3 blocks, the vibration is gone.
Exactly.
But falling in love, building a vision of the future with someone, that is striking the thickest string on the instrument with a sledgehammer.
A sledgehammer. The resonance of that massive strike could theoretically last for years.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. When you map Hume's acoustic physics onto the behavior of the girl at the party, the tragedy of the situation becomes crystal clear. When she opens Instagram to look at his stories or reads through old texts, she rationalizes it as, like, passive observation.
Right.
She thinks she's just checking the weather.
Yeah. But she is fundamentally misunderstanding her own actions. She isn't observing the string, she is plucking it again.
Every single time you send a just saying hi text, every time you check their follower account, you are physically restriking the guitar string of that emotional attachment. You are artificially resetting the decay process back to maximum volume. You are forcing the music of your own heartbreak to play on an endless loop.
You are actively denying your brain the silence it requires to heal. But your earlier question still remains right.
Yeah.
If we know the string is vibrating with the pain of 2 broken legs, why do we compulsively keep plucking it?
We have to move past the idea that we do it just because we're sad. Like, there's a much more insidious neurochemical mechanism at play here.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the slot machine effect.
Let's dive into that. In behavioral psychology, there's this concept called intermittent variable rewards.
Okay.
If you pull a lever and get a pellet every single time, it's boring. If you never get a pellet, you stop pulling. But if you pull the lever and get a pellet sometimes, at random intervals, the dopamine system goes into hyperdrive.
It becomes profoundly addictive.
Very addictive. That person who is giving you emotional crumbs is operating as a human slot machine. You send a text. Sometimes they ignore it.
Right.
Sometimes you get a one-word answer. But sometimes they send back a nostalgic inside joke. Ding, ding, ding.
The jackpot.
The jackpot. When that jackpot hits, your brain's reward circuit floods with dopamine. You experience a massive, overwhelming spike of micro-pleasure. For about 3 seconds, you feel totally validated. They remembered you. You matter.
But a dopamine spike that sharp is always followed by a crash. You get the micro-pleasure, but it sits right alongside a tidal wave of cognitive dissonance. Because while you're smiling at the text, the executive part of your brain knows the truth.
It knows it's fake.
Right. I mean, it's like eating junk food on a diet. You get the immediate joy of the sugar, followed instantly by the guilt and the fear of ruining your health. You feel shame and a profound, expanding void of loneliness because you know the interaction is fundamentally hollow.
What's fascinating here is the neurochemical whiplash. Once the initial dopamine clears your system, your baseline actually drops lower than it was before you picked up the phone.
Wait, really?
Yes. The micro-pleasure evaporates, but the massive negative emotions, the shame and the void, remain. So the interaction actually magnified your loneliness.
And what does the brain do when it feels an agonizing spike in loneliness? It seeks the only painkiller it remembers.
Another hit of dopamine.
Another spin on the slot machine.
It creates this totally self-cannibalizing loop. You seek comfort from the exact source of your trauma, and the result is a tragic misallocation of human potential. I mean, you end up pouring literal oceans of energy, thought, and affection into people who only want fields and mountains.
You become a repository for their ego, literally an emotional trash can. And recognizing the indignity of that, realizing that your profound emotional depth is being used as a cheap ego boost for someone else, that is the necessary friction required to break the loop.
So we arrive at the critical juncture. We understand the evolutionary pain in the anterior cingulate cortex.
Right.
We understand Hume's vibrating string. We see the slot machine dopamine trap. How do we practically dismantle the casino?
We need actionable escape strategies. And the first one relies on altering your environment, not your willpower. Like, if you have a gambling addiction, you don't put a slot machine in your living room and just promise yourself you won't pull the lever.
Because willpower is a depleting resource.
Exactly.
By 10 p.m. after a long, stressful day, your executive function is exhausted. If the slot machine is accessible, you will pull the lever. You must introduce extreme friction into the system to block the stimulus.
This means removing the chocolate from the pantry. You have to actively ask for space. You must explicitly tell mutual friends, I am trying to move on. Please do not offer me unsolicited updates about their life.
And it requires a really ruthless curation of your digital environment. Block, mute, delete, unfollow, erase the phone number.
So wipe that out.
You have to build an architecture of friction where plucking the guitar string requires so much active effort that you give your rational brain time to intervene before you make the mistake.
But, friction isn't foolproof. Let's say you've deleted the number, but it's a Friday night, the loneliness spikes, and you could easily find their profile if you just type their name into a browser.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right. When that visceral, physiological craving for a crumb hits you, friction isn't enough. We need a chemical intervention.
And this is where we leverage our earlier discussion on pain. Remember, the brain is interpreting this emotional craving through the exact same neural structures as a physical injury.
The 2 broken legs.
Right. So The moment that intense urge hits, you need to trick the brain into deploying its own painkillers. You drop everything and exercise vigorously.
Wait, like right then.
Right then, run up a hill, do burpees until you're exhausted, lift heavy weights.
I gotta say, when I first read about using physical exertion for an emotional crisis, it felt super disconnected, like prescribing a treadmill for a broken heart. But the neurochemistry bridges the gap perfectly.
It really does. Intense physical exertion forces the body to synthesize and release endorphins. Endorphins are essentially endogenous opioids.
Nature's morphine.
Exactly. They are chemically designed to bind to the opioid receptors in the brain to numb physical agony. Because the pain of rejection is localized in those exact same physical pain centers, the endorphins flood the circuitry and actively chemically soothe the emotional distress.
You are literally biohacking your own pharmacy. You are medicating the craving with your body's natural painkillers, just buying yourself enough chemical relief to survive the urge without pulling the lever on the slot machine.
You use the physical intervention to stabilize the neurochemistry, and once the chemistry is stable, then you can employ a cognitive override.
And this is about psychological reframing. So when you're staring at the search bar, debating whether to type their name, you have to split your psyche into two distinct avatars.
I love this strategy.
Yeah, it's great. Ask yourself, what would a person who has successfully healed from this pain do in this exact second?
A person who respects their own emotional bandwidth, who recognizes their worth, would close the laptop. They would not accept the crumb.
Then you force yourself to look at the alternative avatar. What would a person who stays stuck in this miserable, agonizing loop for the next 5 years do right now?
They would look at the profile.
Yeah.
They would pluck the string. By forcing this binary choice, you yank your brain out of the limbic system's emotional craving, and you force the prefrontal cortex, your center of logic and identity, to take the wheel. You aren't just deciding whether to check an app, you're deciding which version of your future self you are going to actualize.
That is incredibly empowering. It shifts the focus entirely away from the person rejecting you and places the locus of control entirely on your own character development, which leads perfectly into the final shift in perspective we need to adopt, which is realigning our expectations of other people.
Yeah, and this requires acknowledging a harsh but ultimately freeing truth. Just as you cannot force your autonomic nervous system to stop loving them, they cannot force their nervous system to suddenly desire you.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is, but a lack of reciprocity is not inherently a crime.
It's just a fundamental mismatch. And when we refuse to accept that mismatch, we end up distorting our entire social reality. There's a brilliant observation from the writer C.S. Lewis that perfectly diagnoses this distortion.
Oh, yeah.
He pointed out the total absurdity of human attention. Like, we will frequently claim we have absolutely no time for our friends, the people who actively cherish us, support us, and offer us whole loaves of bread, yet we seem to have infinite hours to obsess over our enemies, or in this context, the people who constantly reject us.
We stand in front of a locked door, literally bang their fists against it until they bleed, completely ignoring the people standing behind us with their arms wide open.
We prioritize the slot machine over genuine connection. Okay, this has been an intensely layered deep dive into the architecture of heartbreak. So what does this all mean? If we synthesize the philosophy, the neuroscience, and the psychology, where does that leave you, the listener, right now?
Well, it leaves you with the reality that the process of endurance is not going to be comfortable. The string has been struck with incredible force. The acoustic wave is loud, and the anterior cingulate cortex is sounding the alarm.
The pain isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of functional neurobiology. But the mechanics of decay are an absolute certainty. If you build the friction, if you hack the endorphins, and if you continually choose the identity of the person who heals, you will stop plucking the string.
And if you start touching the string, the vibration must eventually fade into silence.
And you simply have to outlast the resonance. And when the quiet finally comes, you will regain the capacity to hear a new, much healthier song.
Exactly.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that takes us beyond just moving on from a bad relationship and gets into the actual physical wiring of your brain. We know about neuroplasticity, right? The idea that neurons that fire together wire together. Your brain physically reshapes itself based on repeated behaviors.
Right, it adapts to whatever you feed it.
Exactly. Think about the evolutionary purpose of love and attachment. It's designed to bond us to people who ensure our mutual survival. But when you stay in these toxic loops, when you continually pull the lever of that intermittent slot machine for emotional crumbs, you are actively training your neural pathways to associate love with anxiety, neglect, and starvation.
Yeah, it's a really heavy thought.
So the question isn't just about whether you can get over this one specific person. The question is, what happens to the physical architecture of your mind if you spend the next decade wiring your brain to crave your own suffering? Are you permanently altering your capacity to recognize a healthy, requited love when it finally stands right in front of you? Think about all those miles of emotional ocean you've poured into people who only offered you crumbs. What would happen to your life, starting right this very minute, if you took that exact same ocean of energy and finally poured it into yourself?